Hey guys, we're back for part 2. We've been in the woods a little bit on the Windows side, getting some rendered outputs from Enscape on Rhino. Enscape, the plugin, you can look it up. I think it's free for students, Enscape, and that will work with Rhino, SketchUp, AutoCAD, ArchiCAD, and Revit. We used it with Rhino to just pull out a few different types of outputs. We have basically our diffuse layer output with some colors and tones and plaster. We have a material ID layer, and we have a depth layer. So we're going to play with those three first. So a quick trick, we're going to drag all three of those and load them into Photoshop. Now I've seen what people do when you have lots of outputs like this, where you're trying to mix things together. I often see people like open them all and then they select them, like select all, copy, paste, and like move things into the layers. We're going to do things a little bit more efficiently than that. So we have our three layers here. We can go File, Scripts, Load Files into Stack, Add Open Files, okay? And that's just going to take all of our open files, and now we have those files as layers in one file instead of as three separate files. So now I can close those, and we can save this as a Photoshop document. So let's call this our Day 3 compositing. Okay, great. So one of the things we can do is play with depth. So the first thing, I'm actually just going to do a little bit of funny repair on this. So I'm just gonna, yeah, okay, so that's that. I'm gonna do the same on here by it's like the stupid way of doing everything, so we should have just turned that off before, but here we go. Good, okay, so now we've got our three layers and they're set up on top of each other. The first thing I'm gonna do is take this depth layer and I'm just gonna turn it into a channel in the Photoshop document, okay? So I'm gonna copy this, and then in channels, I'm going to create a new channel. I'm going to paste that information in there. So sorry, we got to have the selected copy, channel, paste. This is calling it alpha 1, but I'm actually going to call it depth because it's not an alpha channel, it's a depth channel. And that just gives us information. I'm going to click back on RGB, so that's just hidden and not selected. And now that that's a channel, I don't actually need that layer anymore because I'm just going to use it as a channel. So you can, when you're loading selections, you can load up channels. That's one thing you can do. So you can pick a channel, right? So that this document, if I want depth, it's going to pick that. And if I was to paint on top of this channel with this selection, you would see that it will fade as I go back because the selection is not regular. So more importantly, what we can do is with this view in mind, we can have our active view and we can run a filter that is called blur and lens blur. And if I say none, you'll see that it just lens blurs the entire image, right? Because it's just a lens blur across the entire thing. But because we've added depth information as a channel to our image, we're able to actually map this lens blur to the depth channel. Okay, now what we can do, so I'm just going to make the blur really pronounced so we can see it. We can click on a part of the image that we want to be in focus because Photoshop now knows how close we are to that. So if I click at the back, that piece comes into focus and we have a lens blur depth, focal depth effect that runs towards the front. If we click in the middle, say it's all about this facility here. So this really gives us full control over our depth of field after the fact. So it's a really handy thing. In a situation like this, we could probably simulate it because we're so far from the image. We could simulate it with that tilt shift filter I was showing yesterday. But if you're doing a rendering where you're looking in a room down a hallway and say there's objects on tables, it takes all of that information and basically allows you to, after the fact, click on whatever part of the image you want to be in focus, and it picks that, it understands that as a certain depth, and then applies the blur moving in either direction from that. So that's a nice little trick. I'm going to leave that here, and that just gives us a sense of depth, just mostly to show you that effect. I'm going to select this color range here. We don't need too much to go on there, and I'm going to mask that out. Oops, invert that and mask that out. We almost need to feather that a little bit more. Peculiar. Oh, it's because I did the blur first. Let's do that backwards. Good. Okay, so So we have a color range here that we want to knock out. That looks a little bit crisper for now. That's a little bit better. Ideally, we'd actually export that just as a translucent channel. I just had that set improperly. So, and then we have, we can place our tone in behind whatever type we'd want. And to get rid of this kind of weird edge, I might change this to be a multiply. Sorry, I'm just going to actually make this white. And for this mask, we can then feather it a little bit if we like. And ultimately, if we wanted to play with that, oh, it's because it's black and behind, sorry. The other thing we can do is that same color range. I'm sorry that it came through black, that wasn't my intention. Sorry, it's been a long week. Let's do that again. So select color range. What I'd like to do is actually just paint this white. Yeah, okay, so we're going to just fill that white. So that's kind of what we wanted to begin with, yeah. So now we can select that color range and invert it. Too much range. That's what we want. There we go. Invert that, mask this out. So now, if with a white background, if I was to increase the feathering of this as we showed yesterday, now we can like fade off the edge of our map if we want. We can play with that edge. Okay, so we have some kind of rendered output here. That whole channel we can choose to have whatever degree of presence we want in our image. If we want to select all the houses here, because we have a material ID channel, we can do that using a similar process. So we can select, sorry, make that the active layer. We can select color range and say we want to just flatten out all of our buildings. We can just pick just our feature buildings. You see they're actually a little bit different from each other, sort of as we wanted. So we have that as a selection now. We can go ahead and save that. So we can save that selection. A new channel, we can call that our inst buildings. We can then grab, if we'd like, select a color range. Pick these guys, they're a little bit different. And so we have these, and then we can save that selection as our houses. So now, without this channel in mind, we have this, we can just load in those selections. So anything we want to, so say we want to take our houses, now we have that as a selection, and we can provide adjustments to this layer, like changing their levels, for example. Right? So we can darken those houses down independently. We can remap them to go in levels from black to white. Right? So we have control over individual components of the image because we have that material channel that was output separately. If we wanted to add a tone, for example, we could load up onto here, select and load up our institutional buildings. Okay, and now we have those. So we could, if we wanted to, add a new layer that's a solid color. That would be one way to do it. We could make them whatever type of millennial pink we want. Let's just stay on point with that. So we have this new thing, and then we can use that to multiply so we still pick up the tone. So all of that manipulation can happen later. So when we're working, if we want that kind of flexibility, we just want to have those tones. So we're still working without any vector information at all. We're working all in raster. So if we were doing a mix, we could have, like we did with our Make 2D, right? When we added up everything in our Illustrator file, we had those selectable houses in our Exploded one. We could use those as an overlay here as well. Just trying to show you the range of options. If you had a more complex rendering with, say, a whole bunch of people in it, so I'll pull up an example from an interior. Let's say something like, okay. All right. So here's another set using the same engine, but a different, like an interior setting. So here, because we have lots of different materials mapped everywhere, our material ID channel looks totally different. This actually looks like some of the drawings you guys are trying to make right now, just by chance. And then we have a kind of render, right, with people and plants and textures and things laid into it in this way. So when we lay these things over, we can use this for our depth channel. We have our material ID, which allows us to select color ranges, or just using the magic wand, we can just pick individual people. And so then we can take, the question was, we have these very realistic people. So say, let's load these three into a stack. Okay. For some reason, okay, I'm not sure. Oh, I think it's because we layered them all in with the depth channel. That was weird. Everything came in with the, see, this depth is actually a grayscale, so I'm just going to change the mode of that to RGB and save that. And then we're going to load those into us. So for whatever reason, all of those images picked up the color depth of the oh. There we go. Scripts, load files into stack, add open files. Okay. There we go. So we have this material ID layer. If we wanted all of our people, say, to be simple and flat, like illustrated versions like you were talking about, but we have all these rendered folks here, what we can do is go into this channel, use our magic wand, and just pick all the people like that. We could do it one at a time. We could do them all together as a group like this. And we can go back here. We have them, right? And now we can take that and take a brush, pick whatever color is interesting us. And then paint directly over those people, just like that's the easy. You can go to fill, whatever. You could have a masking layer. I did that destructively over this just so we could see what it looks like. If I undid that operation, we know that we can create a new layer, and on that new layer, or we could do a new solid color layer, just like that. And that has this mask on it already. So then if we wanted to add blushes of that tone to other points in the image, we can make that mask active, and we know that if we paint white anywhere, we're going to get that pink color. We could also choose whether or not this is just flattening out all those characters, or whether or not it's coloring them, right? We can use like a color overlay like that. So we have that flexibility because of that material channel, that we can pick items in our render, add them together. We could live trace this entire thing if we'd like, to get kind of vector regions, right? So it's just, think of that as a really useful channel that it's not actually looking like anything you want to look for, but it gives you the ability to select things. So we could likewise select, say, this floor, find the sort of tone of that floor. So it's going to grab all those pixels, and then coming back here, say we just wanted in this image to warm up that tile, we could take that selection over here and add maybe a photo filter, and then we can see just really quickly we can add tone just to that very specific area. So it's just like really quick ways to create masks. So both of those two things, so we have the depth channel and we have the region masks, and together they give us basically the flexibility to play with those types of operations. So the one thing I haven't done here yet is done that lens blur. So if I say blur, lens blur, source is the depth, we can choose, you can see as I click through the image, it's picking different locations or different depths to apply that to. That is a destructive edit, so I will say, so you can duplicate that layer first if you'd like to have a separate layer with the blur to be able to undo that. I'm just going to do it right on top for now, and then we can keep messing with these levels because everything is still, so those levels are just impacting those houses, right? So we're still able to manipulate those independently of everything else. Does that process make sense generally? Sorry, this ended up being a bit of a sort of stunted example because of the technical issues there, but essentially we're using the depth to give ourselves flexibility in blurring and playing with those things. We give ourselves material ID in order to select regions, and then altogether we can balance those things and start to add in other flavors and things that we would like to pick up in the image. Finally, if we take so what I would usually do to layer this together, so say I'm really happy with this for some reason, I'll take this and I'll export, do a quick PNG export of this so we can see. So final. Just to teach us all a lesson. All right. So we'll open that there, and we're going to open this as well, which is our lines v3. And so I think you guys get the general gist of what we're going to do here, but essentially we have now on one hand our rendered output, which we can either scale to artboard or artboard scale to image. I'm just going to do this for now, just so we have. It's a little bit funny, isn't it? Created a whole other artboard. It's kind of handy. Yeah, somehow we just cranked through a whole bunch of artboards here, hey? Gee whiz. There's like just, you must double click on the image to create the artboard or something, so we're even more magic than we think. Okay, great. So we've got that artboard ready to go. We have these. Now you can see, so handsome. It has created our hidden lines as dashed lines. That's great. We can work with that because it's organized them onto a separate layer. We can also just figure that out based on, so we can see that's our Make 2D hidden for these buildings. So right away, if I want to take all of our hidden lines, so I want to pick those and these. So what I usually do first is select all of these lines, and I just do like a default fill and stroke just to clean everything up so I can sort of see what's happening. Make it a little thinner. So we have our see-through lines here, which you might want for your graphics. To grab these seafood lines, I'm going to grab seafood lines. Here we go. I'm going to grab all these together. And you can see here now we could change these strokes to, say, maybe a very light gray. And maybe we do like the dash on them. Maybe we don't. Maybe we want, if we're going to have a dash, something like small and reasonable. These are very small. It's almost like a little dot pattern like that, right? And so we might also take these and push them into a new layer that's at the back of everything, because we generally don't want our hidden lines in front of our other lines, right? So right away we're already getting something a little bit better. Then we have these facilities. I'm not going to do too much to this because I think let's just pick up the rest of these lines. So these facilities and these houses, let's make that 0.2, and let's turn off that perimeter for now. So we can kind of clean things up here if we wanted to. We could do the trick with these outlines. So let's do that. So we'll do it another way. So we're going to select this layer, and we're going to say duplicate that whole layer. So now we've got two of them. I'm going to turn the other one off. So I've got these lines here. Object, path, outline, stroke. Doesn't like it. Thanks for coming out. Let's try that one more time. Let's make sure. Oh, there's something on this layer that's not a stroke. So let's. Wow, it's really unhappy with this whole situation, isn't it? Okay, so let's try this. We'll go through default again. So let's object, path, outline, stroke, unknown error. I don't know if it's ever returned an error message to me where it knows exactly what happened. It's like the error happened because of a mistake. It's like, thanks. Okay, it looks like it did it to some of them. Unfortunately, because that's hard to trace. So we're going to crank that layer out. Turn this one back on. Let's see if it just works better here. So we're going to copy and paste in place, and we're going to do this outline stroke. Really doesn't like it, but it did it in most places. So we're just going to keep cranking ahead with this, adding that together. adding it all together and grouping. Yeah, no, something's amiss with that particular output. So we're just going to undo those steps. Sorry guys, I'm not sure that's a funny mistake. Okay, so that's our baselines. There's nothing super obvious that's tipping me off that these are, you know, really not working right. So I'm sorry if I can't tell you exactly what's going on. But they should. Everything looks good. There's no fill, they all have a nice stroke. Let's try one more time. Let's try copying them, putting them in a new file. See, isolate our variables. This is the last step of the day, so we can be a little bit. So these object path outline stroke. Nope, it's the geometry itself. That much we know. So we're going to live with the way they look. And here. So this gives them a little bit of sense of transparency. We also have this object and its hidden lines, which I can just going to match to that. So everything kind of looks right. And these ones we can also carry into our background layer. So it's always behind. Then the last step would be to copy this kit and caboodle to here, and then we can lay that out and align it. So usually what I'll do in this situation is find a particular point that works, line that up, switch to the scale tool, which is S, or you click on the side there, you lock the scale to that point, and then you just drag and just match another point, and everything should line up. That's a nice way of doing that. The further apart those lines are, the better off you're going to be in terms of picking something accurate. I've made things a little bit difficult for myself by blurring things, right? So we're kind of like, we're getting a little bit washed out here, but I think you get a little bit of the idea. So if we push our image to the background layer like that, then we have some control over what's happening in terms of those tones. I think what happened was when we scaled this, we were scaling without fill and stroke. So if you guys are familiar with that, does that make, yeah, so if you've done that and you have them relative still, but you want to scale them all together, there's a stupid trick, which is that you select all of them, and we're going to say we want all the line weights to be twice as thick as they are, right? There's no clean way to do that in Illustrator if you have multiple line weights in your selection. They kind of like, if you start to increase it, they all snap to the same weight. So what we could do is transform and scale. So what we're going to do is uniformly scale this to 50%, and we are not going to scale the strokes and effects, so it's going to keep the same scale of stroke and effect, right? So we say, okay, great. Now we're going to go Object Transform Scale. Now we're going to scale it uniformly 200%, and we are going to scale the strokes and effects, right? This is a little stupid trick. But now they're twice as thick as they were before, but they are still very small. So let's do that operation again, but much smaller. So we're going to scale it. Do not scale strokes and effects to 10%, and then Object Transform Scale 200% with the strokes and effects. Whoops, it's much bigger than that, right? Sorry, scale 1000%, right? With scaling strokes and effects. Right, now everything's dark and bold. So we've picked up, so if you have line weights of different types and you want to scale them together, you can either drag boxes and do this whole sort of thing and then scale it down. But that stupid method that I just showed actually works reasonably well. So we could take that, we're selecting our layer, and then we could drop our opacity down if we want to pick up more of the drawing underneath. But you can see here, even with this, oh, the color's really getting washed out, isn't it, on that board? Still, okay. We can start to, down here, let's make this multiply, so we're picking up those tones, so it's not just light. But you can see a little bit that we have some graphic qualities here that are approaching some of the things you guys are showing. So there's a mix of kind of flat illustrated quality to these, where you've really like ironed out other places where you have shade and shadow and like actual site shadows that might be important for what you're doing. And as you pull those things together, then you can start to play with all sorts of stuff. So say you like the way this works, you can now capture this and pull it back into Photoshop and start to mask it off and add other textures, and or take the ground using the material channel. So if we go back to Photoshop, you could take the ground, which we can pick from here. So if we select this color range, so we have the ground, and we could use that as a mask for another image. So if we have, so if I just save this selection as ground, now if we were to paste in some totally different texture, like trees. Whatever the picture is for tree on Wikipedia. Can you imagine how famous that tree feels? Like whenever someone searches tree, there's like how many trees have ever lived in the world? This one's like, yeah, if you look up tree on Wikipedia, that's me. I'm just going to open that here. Paste this in behind real quick. That's not very flattering, but we'll use it. And now we can load that selection, the ground selection, and on this layer we can use that as a mask, right? So this looks really terrible, but if we were to drop this way down, so say we're just trying to create some sense of, so it's a lot of the other images that you guys showed me had some texture in behind. I chose a dumb texture, but this could be like something like a watercolor that you did yourself, or a photograph that you took of the wall in Sprinkler Room 007 that you've then abstracted and played with the levels on, right? So we can kind of keep layering in that type of information, and you can end up with something, I think, that could be worth playing with. So the thing before I even leave, I just have to just desaturate that. We only want that to apply there, so for what it's worth. So this is now, so one last thing I'll show you. So this right now is linked to the layer. So if I were to move this, you see how that falls off of the shape? That's actually kind of the more interesting drawing we made this morning, right? It's actually just this. But if you deselect this lock, that means that the mask is going to stay in place and the underlay is going to be scalable, right? So I can move this and do whatever I want to this image and align that texture however I want, independent of the mask. Okay, so now we can get, we can start to play with how that texture finds its way into the model. Good. Okay. Sorry, that ran right up to time. It's noon now. I'm going to settle for early this afternoon the exact set of deliverables for the final assignment with Jason. I'll send that out. I'll post it to D12, but then I'll send an email to everybody in the class, so you guys watch your emails for that. It'll lay out what those things are. If you guys have concerns about that, send me an email right away, or if it's not clear, let me know and I'll clarify for everyone. And then the idea is tomorrow you'll have printed versions that you'll bring in for 9 o'clock. We're going to tape them up to the walls here, so if you can bring some masking tape as well, that would be helpful. It's just as long as one person remembers to bring masking tape will be good. So maybe like the 2 responsible people in this class, whoever you are, like try and remember that, and then we'll all use it. And so we'll throw that stuff up on the wall, and we'll we have a light switch in here. This room can actually become super bright. It makes a great clicking sound. You can try it on your way out. And what we'll do, sorry, I don't need to record this.